ESPN did what ESPN does, and I don't necessarily care or hate it because it gives us something to talk about. It is a downtime in the sports calendar, and we're gearing up for college football. So what better time than to release the top 25 list of best college football players since the year 2000. And it's an interesting list because if I ask you, like, close your eyes and list great college football players in the last 25 years, essentially, you got a pretty long while before you can stop and say, like, you know what, I think we're out of names. But not all of them can fit in the top 25. But I have a list of, I think, 10 people who either deserve to be on that list or at least deserve to have a really strong conversation about that list. And I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, this person should come off, this person should go on, because then we'll be here forever. But there's a list of 10 names that I think either got snubbed or should have been strong considerations for this list. So I'm going to show you the list. Top 25 rankings since 2000. Donkey Kong Sue is number one on the list, which I do not have a problem with. I think that's probably fair and maybe even flat out correct. Now, it gets wonky from there. The fact that Baker Mayfield is listed above Cam Newton and Vince Young feels incorrect. Ed Reed is at 5. Ed Reed might be number 2. Tim Tebow is at 6, feels blasphemous. Then Reggie Bush at 7. Bryant McKinney, Joe Burrow, and Larry Fitzgerald are at 8, 9, and 10. 11 through 15, Terrell Suggs, Joe Thomas, Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald, and David Pollock. Deshaun Watson is 16. Roy Williams, the defensive back / linebacker from Oklahoma, is 17. Kyler Murray, Devontae Smith, Lamar Jackson are 18 through 19. And then Justin Blackmon, Will Anderson Jr., Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, at 23. Julius Peppers at 24. And Jonathan Taylor at 25. I think you might be able to make the argument, and I wouldn't argue, I wouldn't push back much against this. Jonathan Taylor might not be the best Wisconsin running back since 2000. So for him to be in the top 25 players since 2000, and I'm not knocking Jonathan Taylor at all. He had 3 very, very, very good seasons at Wisconsin. Melvin Gordon's senior year, and I didn't realize this, he finished second in the 2014 Heisman Trophy voting to Marcus Mariota, who, if you are looking through here, is not on the list. Now, I didn't bang the drum for Marcus Mariota, and I probably should have in retrospect, because the year he won the Heisman Trophy, it was warranted. But Melvin Gordon finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting to Marcus Mariota that year. He rushed for almost 2,600 yards, 2,587, 29 touchdowns as a senior, 7.5 yards per carry. For his career, he averaged 7.8 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor had 3 very good, very productive years. He had 3 full years where he was the guy, and he had 5 more touchdowns than Melvin Gordon did in about 2 years and sporadic runs as a freshman and a sophomore. And I hate to sit behind Monte Ball, which is a whole other discussion. He had nearly 2,600 yards rushing as a senior and nearly 30 touchdowns. So I think you could argue that Jonathan Taylor might not even be the best running back at Wisconsin in this time frame. So for him to be one of the 25 best college football players since 2000 feels blasphemous. At the same time, let me look. 1, 2, 3. I have 3 other running backs outside of Melvin Gordon that should be above Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion. Now, there are only 2 running backs on this. Let me put this back up. There are only 2 running backs on the list: Reggie Bush and Jonathan Taylor. So since 2000, ESPN is trying to tell me that Reggie Bush and Jonathan Taylor are the 2 best running backs. So there is no Derrick Henry, who's not on my list, as top 25 players, and probably should be. You have Melvin Gordon for me. Leonard Fournette, I think, deserves to be in the discussion. But then there are two that, in my very humble opinion, are absolutely 100% top 25 players since 2000. One of them is Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson is not on this list. Adrian Peterson, you could argue, should have won the Heisman Trophy as a true freshman. Adrian Peterson is one of the all-time great running backs in college football history, especially since 2000. And he's not on the list? Adrian Peterson is not on the list. Let me pull up Adrian Peterson as a redshirt freshman. 1,925 yards, 15 touchdowns. As a freshman, finished second to Matt Leinart, who we'll talk about in a second, in the Heisman Trophy voting. As a freshman, Adrian Peterson is absolutely on the list of the top 25 players since 2000. And then the second one, hold on, I'm pulling up Adrian Peterson. He rushed for 3,000 yards. Three separate times he rushed for 1,000 yards in banged up, beat up seasons. His junior season, he played in 7 games and rushed for 1,000 yards. What are we doing here? Adrian Peterson deserves to be on the list. Secondly, maybe higher on the list is Darren McFadden. I don't think Darren McFadden ever gets the credit that Darren McFadden deserves. But if you look at this, is Darren McFadden better than Jonathan Taylor as a college running back? The answer is absolutely, unequivocally yes. He finished runner-up in the Heisman Trophy voting twice. In college, as a freshman, he rushed for 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns. As a sophomore, he rushed for 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns. As a junior, he rushed for 1,800 yards and 16 touchdowns while splitting carries with Felix Jones. So put that into perspective a little bit, where Felix Jones rushed for 1,100 yards twice in back-to-back seasons, the same years that Darren McFadden rushed for 1,600 yards and 1,800 yards. Give 60% of Felix Jones's carries to Darren McFadden. And is he right beside Reggie Bush on this list at number 7? Probably. Darren McFadden wins one of the Heisman trophies. Those 2 seasons he finished second. If he's not splitting, and it's not Felix Jones's fault that he's a good football player too. It's just Darren McFadden is unquestionably one of the top 25 players since 2000 to me. Now, I recognize, by the way, that when you go through this list, there feels as if like, okay, well, we've got to make sure we've got some offensive linemen, right? So Bryant McKinney and Joe Thomas and isn't did I screw this up somewhere? Isn't Robert Gallery was, one of their like honorable mentions. Somebody that they strongly considered was Robert Gallery. But you look through here and you're like, okay, we've got offensive linemen, we've got defensive linemen, we've got defensive backs. Like Ndamukong Suh is number 1. So I think you look at this as if like, okay, we've got to make sure we've got every position outside of, like punter, kicker, etc. listed. But when you look at quarterbacks, for instance, Deshaun Watson is 16. Kyler Murray is 18. Could you argue that Johnny Manziel is a better college football player than Deshaun Watson? I think, yeah. Could you argue that Johnny Manziel was a better college football player than Lamar Jackson? Probably. Could you argue that Robert Griffin III was better than all 3 of them? Yeah. Yeah, he could. I've got a couple other. I don't know that he's top 25, but I also think if you like, I think you have to put like a brick wall at the end of the college career. Because, for instance, Marcus Mariota is not on this list. Marcus Mariota had a great Heisman Trophy season. It wasn't one of those years where there's a lack of like spectacular options and possibilities. Therefore, the winner is Marcus Mariota. He had a bona fide season. Jameis Winston doesn't get the credit Jameis Winston deserves. Won a Heisman Trophy, won a national championship, took his team to the first college football playoff. Lost a game as a starting quarterback in college. One singular game as a college quarterback at a big-time institution. I don't know that he's top 25, but is Jameis Winston a better college quarterback than Deshaun Watson? I don't know. I think you can have that conversation. Then I have Matt Leinart. To me, feels like a big miss. Was Matt Leinart a better college quarterback than Deshaun Watson? Yeah. Was he better than Joe Burrow? He was kind of right there. And if Joe Burrow's number 9 on the list, now Joe Burrow had an incredible final season at LSU, maybe the best season in college football history. But you look at this list of quarterbacks. First of all, Baker Mayfield number 2 is ridiculous. But obviously that position is going to be well represented because the individual statistics that they garner and the most important individuals trophy in college sports and sports in general really is given to a quarterback more often than not. But there's only one non-Heisman Trophy winning quarterback on the list, and it's Deshaun Watson, who's at 16. Matt Leinart, I think, is one of the great college quarterbacks of all time. And to not have him in the top 25 feels wrong. And then the final quarterback I've got on the list, and this is just sentimental. This is just from a byproduct of how old I am and who was really good when I was coming up. He's not top 25, I don't think. But Pat White from West Virginia should be in the conversation of if you're going to put, maybe it was top 25 quarterbacks or top 10, 15, 20 quarterbacks. Pat White from West Virginia has a soft spot in my heart because they were doing really fun, exciting things at that time. They were a ball to watch. And that West Virginia kind of triumvirate there, like they had Pat White and they had Steve Slayton and then Tavon Austin. They were fun, exciting, and interesting to watch. And Pat White just always has had a sentimental place in my heart. There are 2 more. One, I think I'm okay, but obviously deserves to be in the conversation. You look at defensive players here, and you look at just flat out like linebackers. Khalil Mack and Will Anderson Jr. I have no problem with Khalil Mack being on the list. Will Anderson Jr. was a beast at Alabama. There's no question about it. Was Will Anderson better than Luke Kuechly? And I know that sounds like you're trying to do like a first take, like a Mad Dog Russo. That's like, Moses Malone was way better than Shaquille O'Neal. Luke Kuechly tackled everything at Boston College. And then went on to be like, is Luke Kuechly a borderline Hall of Famer? Probably not, because he didn't have the longevity in the NFL. Luke Kuechly is one of the best linebackers since 2000. And I don't think you can argue that. But then the last one I've got on my list, and then I'll shut up and quit bitching. Because like, if I put together my top 25 list, could you pick it apart? Probably. But there's one more glaring omission. Look at wide receiver on this list. Larry Fitzgerald is number 10. Devontae Smith won the Heisman Trophy and is number 19. Justin Blackmon is number 21. And I think that is maybe my biggest point of contention. I thought Justin Blackmon was going to be like an NFL freak, and he did not turn out to be that at all. And neither did the guy that I'm going to, if I was to replace Justin Blackmon on the list. He didn't really turn out to be an NFL bona fide superstar like I thought he would. But if your list includes Larry Fitzgerald, Devontae Smith, and Justin Blackmon, if you only have 3 wide receivers, was Michael Crabtree a better college football wide receiver than Justin Blackmon? I think so. Because you could damn near argue Michael Crabtree took Texas Tech, that play against Texas to win the game is one of the most legendary college football plays ever. And Michael Crabtree, borderline, almost by himself, helped take Texas Tech into the top 10 and into the top 5. Now, Mike Leach, great coach. Graham Harrell was a good college quarterback. But Michael Crabtree was a dude. He was borderline unguardable in that offense in college. I'm going to pull up Michael Crabtree stats because try me with a sorry-ass retriever like Crabtree. No, that's Michael Hart, who probably you could make a case if you're doing the top 25 running backs since 2000 that Mike Hart should be on the list. But Mike Crabtree, I want to look at this. Finished 5th in the Heisman voting in 2008. 2 seasons, freshman and a sophomore. 134 receptions, 1,962 yards, and 22 touchdowns as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, 97 catches, 1,100 yards, 19 touchdowns. In 2 years of college football, Michael Crabtree caught 41 touchdowns. I rest my case. Michael Crabtree deserves to be in the top 25 players since 2000. And I'll die on that hill. Want to know what your thoughts are? You think I've got somebody completely pegged wrong, or you think somebody in the top 25 deserves to be higher? Let me know in the comments down below. Would love to hear from you. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps us get in front of more college football fans, and that's always a good thing. Catch you tomorrow for another episode here of the Daily Huddle.